Dragon Ball FighterZ is a very fast-paced game, and this can make defense very tricky, especially online, which is why offense can be the best defense, since you won't have to block if your opponent is always on the defensive. So in honor of that concept, I wanted to share my favorite mix-ups to use online. Some are quite easy, while others require more practice, but they're all useful for breaking your opponent's defense, similar to how the flu is breaking me right now. Leave a like to help destroy the flu. Alright, on to the mix-ups. So the first mix-up I want to talk about is the double overhead. You've likely seen a bunch of other YouTubers use this technique as well, and it works especially good in the corner. Mid-screen it can also work, but instead of a second heavy attack you want to do a medium attack instead, and wait for the character to actually cross up, and that can be tricky too because it's still a double overhead with the cross up thrown in the mix. However, what makes the double overhead so effective in the corner, especially the heavy attack, is there's no limit to how many times you want to do it. As long as the opponent keeps blocking, you can keep going for it until it hits. And the idea behind this mix-up is the opponent wants to block high initially, but immediately after they want to duck, because they think a low might be coming. So you're basically exploiting that habit because most players want to crouch, so instead you're saying, nah, I'm gonna go for your head twice in a row, you better keep blocking standing. And once you get the opponent to start blocking high over and over again, you can start mixing things up with an empty jump low, which is tougher for some characters than others, but if you're playing online it's still really hard to react to, so it can still be an effective mix-up. Now even though this double overhead mix-up is very effective and a great way to start off combos, it does have one very big weakness, and that's that it's vulnerable to down heavy. Right? So me for example, I'm a bit weird. When I'm being pressured in the corner, sometimes I will just instinctively mash down heavy, and it's saved my butt more times than I can count. So if the opponent does like to mash, then you'll lose with this double overhead technique. And the same can also be said for the empty jump low. If the opponent's mashing any button at all, like probably a light attack, they'll beat you out of the empty jump low. Which is why if you want to do an empty jump low, you almost always want to use an assist, because that locks the opponent down. So you can do a string or knock the opponent down in the corner, call in your assist, then go for an empty jump low, and it's very sneaky. However, what if your opponent has amazing defense? They're just blocking everything. Goku here is a god. He's blocking my double overhead, he's blocking my empty jumps into lows, even when I mess him up like just then right there. When I do it correctly, he's still blocking it. His defense is just immaculate. Now in these situations, I like doing overhead into throw. And it's actually pretty dang sneaky. The opponent falls for it more times than you might think. And best of all, this mix-up does work mid-screen. So even here, I can still catch him. It's very sneaky. Now most of the time the opponent's not going to set you up for it mid-screen, but you can always still do it, and that makes it very effective, especially against opponents who like to block. So if your opponent has really good defense, then the instant dash overhead into throw can be very effective. And one last minute addition that I did want to include is the air dragon rush on opponents who like to tech up and back, which is very common, especially nowadays. When the game first came out, people were teching in all different directions, but since the game's been out for a while now, almost everyone is holding up back when you knock them down to recover in that direction. So with that in mind, one of the best things you can actually do is jump forward and Dragon Rush. This can be a great way to catch the opponent blocking. Now with Android 21, it's a bit of a unique case because her combos almost always end with the opponent teching up and back because they're not in a slide knockdown. But even with more standard characters who do have a slide knockdown, like say Tien for example, this can still be a fantastic mix-up, since so many players do like to tech up and back. And there is one last mix-up I want to cover that can be done solo, and it's actually very important, especially as you get in the higher ranks. And that's after knocking down the opponent, you do empty jump into nothing to bait a vanish. I don't know what it is about vanish, but people love to do it in this game. Whenever they're scared and their back's against the wall and they panic, if they have some extra meter, they will vanish on you. And vanish will lose to down heavy every time as long as you're patient and wait for the vanish. And sometimes I'll go the extra mile after a knockdown, and I'll bait it with an empty jump air dash just like that, then I'll crouch and I'll do down heavy. And even from mid-screen I'll try it sometimes too. We'll be mid-screen, I'll get the knockdown, I'll chase after him, then I'll crouch and just down heavy. It doesn't work every time, but this also works on jump back super dash, which some players will do from mid-screen when they're in a pinch. So even though there are tons of mix-ups in this game, and pressuring the opponent on block or after a knockdown can be very important, never underestimate the power of faking an attack and then down heavying if they vanish or super dash. It's a very good tactic, and I've killed a bunch of players with this trick. And that about does it for the solo mix-up, so now let's talk about what to do if you have your assists at the ready. Now one of my favorites that I don't see many players do is the universal overhead into assist. So you do a string, then the overhead, and right after you press the overhead input, which is just forward and medium for every character, you call in your assist, and if it lands, you can get a full combo now. Now, the damage you get afterwards isn't very much, although you can always make it a bit more by using your tag supers, and under those scenarios it can actually easily do half your opponent's health bar. And I find this mix-up to be especially effective because very many players are only blocking high at the first part of your string, mainly after the instant air dash. After that they're blocking low because most of the time lows are where the combos happen. But every character can do this universal overhead into assist as long as they have the right characters on their team. Now some assists are faster than others, so your timing is going to be a bit different, but this can be a great way to finish off the opponent if they have half health or less. I don't recommend doing it at the start because then the opponent might become wise to it and start trying to jab you out of it. Although in those situations I found some characters have terrible standing light attacks, so they can't even beat out your overhead, it'll just whiff punish them in some scenarios. But even so, I don't recommend doing this trick until the opponent's a bit lower on life, that way you can kill off their character, especially since it does cost one of your assists. Now if your opponent has really good defense and they're blocking pretty much everything, another fantastic trick you can do that's pretty tried and true is a simple block string into assist and then Dragon Rush. Now depending on your character and your assist, your opponent might get pushed a bit further back than normal, in which case you'll have to walk forward a little bit before doing the Dragon Rush. So make sure to take time in training mode and learn the different spacing for each character, because depending on your character, you might not want to do what I just did by ending with heavy into assist. Maybe you want to do just medium into assist because that leaves you a little bit closer. But for Android 21, the heavy leaves me pretty darn close. That's why I was doing heavy into assist and then Dragon Rush. It's the perfect amount of spacing. So once again, go into training mode and figure out what the right spacing is and what attack strings into this assist work best. And the next mix-up I want to talk about is a bit trickier to pull off, but it's very tried and true. It's something that even pro players will use offline at tournaments. It's very, very good. And that's when you do a string into an assist, and then you use the lockdown from that assist to go for a cross-up or an empty jump low, both of which are very sneaky. Now the problem with this mix-up is it has to be an assist that locks the opponent down for a longer amount of time. So of course Vegeta's assist comes to mind, Cell's is pretty good for this too. There are plenty of characters with assists that have pretty good block pressure on them. But a character like Tien, not so much, but it can still work if the opponent's more defensive and is respecting your pressure, because maybe they're expecting an attack from the front so they're going to block anyway, but typically you want an assist that locks the opponent down for a bit longer. But the main idea behind this mix-up is to do a block string that leaves you a bit closer to the opponent, close enough for the cross-up to actually happen, then you do an assist and use the time in between to do an instant air dash over the opponent and then hit medium on the way down. The reason this mix-up can be a bit tricky to pull off is because the instant air dash timing combined with having to wait for your character to actually cross over before doing the attack can be a bit tough to time, especially online, but it really comes down to muscle memory. You're not actually reacting to the cross-up, you're just memorizing how long it takes you to do so, and with enough practice you'll be getting it every time. And the principle is the exact same with the empty jump low as well. You instant air dash, you don't do an attack on the way down, instead you land and then go for a crouching light attack. Or if your character doesn't have one, maybe you'll have enough time for a crouching medium, though that can be a bit riskier. This mix-up, when perfected, can be very, very tough for the opponent to block, so it's very, very good. It's just a bit trickier to learn as well. And last but not least, we have a technique that I consider to be extra dirty, and I didn't even consider it until a friend of mine actually used it against me a few times online. And this attack is actually a bait. So you'll do an attack that is either punishable or at least unsafe, so your opponent thinks it's their turn to attack, but as you're doing the unsafe move, you actually call in your assist, which will beat them out. And for this to work, you have to have a certain assist like Gohan's, which is invincible on startup, or an assist like Vegeta where he's kind of up and out of the way. So Vegito Blue also works for this as well. Any assist where the opponent can't hit them when they're trying to punish you is a good assist to use. So once again, for this trick to work, you intentionally do a move that is unsafe, possibly even punishable on block. Your opponent sees an opening and then goes for it, only to get snared up by your assist. Although it does have one big weakness, which is Vanish, so if your opponent likes to mash Vanish, then this setup will not work because they're going to hit you in the back and most likely dodge the assist as well. Although I suppose there are certain assists that might catch them during a Vanish, but those are very few and far between. Alright everyone, that about does it for my favorite mix-ups to use online. Thanks so much for watching and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, then please leave a like down below, it really does help my channel out a lot. And while you're down there, why not keep that combo going by subscribing and ringing that bell? That way you never miss a future video. Make sure to come back next time, and as always, stay underdogs.